Hello, welcome to our show. We are Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. Here we focus on what it takes to make your ideas happen and the steps you can follow to make it just a little bit easier. Subscribe to our podcast to join the ongoing conversation about all things startup business related. Find even more content on our YouTube channel, Ryan's Business Class. See the link in our description of this episode. So glad to have you here. Maybe we can learn something together. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to our fourth edition of Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. We're very pleased to have you with us today. It is March 29, 2020. And it seems to be we're living in the same world we were last week. In my estimation, things seem to be a little bit better. We seem to be gaining some knowledge and understanding of the circumstances surrounding this coronavirus. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and we're still asking ourselves the question, how long will we be confined to our homes? How long will we be stuck inside? How long must we social distance from one another? And it really goes to make you think, what are some ways that we can improve our lives even while we're in confinement, even while we're alone, and we don't have people and networks upon which to build. And we talked about it last week that, this week we wanted to talk about virtual reality more in depth. Now, I had intended to talk about virtual reality as sort of a home entertainment phenomenon. You put on your headset and you can go into video games, or you can go into movies, or you can go into scenarios of your choice, or you can educate yourself from home, I suppose. And that's the end of it. Everything is from home. People are at home. What else is there to do except be at home using advanced technology to entertain yourself? But it turns out that, there's applications at every level of society for virtual reality. And the more I read, the more I realized that it is the industry of the future, not just for home entertainment, but for all business. And let me give you some examples. The articles that I was reading talked about applications in the professional world. And, I started off reading about how NASA wants to send people to Mars. And we already know that SpaceX also wants to send people to Mars. But the problem is not only how are we going to get there, which is, a 3-year journey, but how are we going to keep these astronauts from going insane during a 3-year confinement? More or less, all they can be promised is to be in a small capsule, receiving nutrition and water, and hurling through space at a high rate of speed. But even at that high rate of speed, they're still going to be in this capsule for months and months and months. And so the Russians and the Americans have both been asking themselves, how possible is it? How emotionally capable or, can people keep their wits about them under such circumstances? Because when they arrive, they're going to have to get busy building. It's not going to be, we made the trip, now everything is easy. It just stays hard. And so what NASA did is they set up a artificial environment on the side of a volcano in Hawaii, and they were going to more or less confine some individuals, potential, let's say, astronauts, in small, cramped spaces with the ability to perhaps go out on the side of the surface of this volcano. And of course, everybody's in on this. So, they've been advised on protocols, what they have to do. And, they're not supposed to go this far from base because it would conflict with the overall purpose of the test, which is how life would be if you were on Mars. So they set it up on the side of volcano. And they immediately they started having problems. The power generator went out. When they went to fix the power generator, the electrician who was working on it hurt himself very badly. He had to be sent to the hospital. And even in that period, that experience of tending to this injured man demonstrated for all present that the safety protocols in this situation were very much lacking. And a few days later, the entire trip was called off because of serious concerns about safety. And this is on Earth. This is on planet Earth, where, help is, might be a little ways away, but it still can come, probably before you die. If you're on the side of a mountain in Mars and the same situation happens, mission failure, everybody's dead. That's the only way it can happen. And so you need to have people who have their wits about them. And if they go through a 3-year journey and at the end of it, their brain is completely fried, they're going to be useless. They're going to be dangerous to the other members of the crew. There was the Russians were a little bit more staunch about the effort. They just did it. They put the guys in confinement and they watched what happened. And what they found happened was that the gentlemen who were put into these, I guess you'd call them canisters, they must have felt like sardines in a can. They started experiencing sleeplessness. They couldn't fall asleep. The entire experience put them into claustrophobia, put them into just a basic sense of physical stress. And the guys who experienced the most stress were actually very conflict-oriented, contributing to a high percentage of the conflicts that took place during this entire time. And so it shows that people can be put under a certain type of exhaustion and stress, and they might even be dangerous. Imagine going 3 years through space in Mars, opening up the capsule, and one of the guys jumps out a raving lunatic and ready to kill anyone who sees. It's not out of the question. All of that money, all of that time, all of that preparation, not to mention the human lives involved. Not to mention, is it even worth doing? So, I mean, there's still questions. One thing that has been suggested, and the reason I wanted to mention this article, is that, during this 3-year confinement, and 3 years to come back if you want them to live, I'm guessing if they send them to Mars, they're not expecting to come back. It's like, thanks for your service. All right, see you. But, 3 years at least. And so you put them in confinement for 3 years, and you put them in virtual reality to give their mind an outlet. So there needs to be, first content. Who's making all this content for virtual reality? This is the question I really want to put forth to my audience, is who's writing the show? So there needs to be something for them to do in the virtual world so that they can live some kind of fulfilling life. They can watch movies, of course. That won't feel very virtual unless you virtually allow them to walk into a movie theater. They can, watch anything that's on YouTube. Again, not virtual. They would need games or social applications or something like this to make it so that they're still interacting with people and they're still building some sort of life, some sort of development, some sort of at least emotional evolution, or maybe in virtual reality you could write your own book, or you could paint your own painting, or you could design any number of things, real estate, cars, any sort of thing. You could have breakthroughs in this amount of time with this amount of sustained focus that you really have no choice but to apply. So that is, how the space program is sort of leading the charge in terms of virtual reality, just because they have goals and virtual reality would play a critical role in achieving that. Now, so we move on to, not outer space, but to our lives here on Earth. We're moving into a phase where we feel like we're in what's called Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is different than Web 1.0 or 2.0. We've already conquered email, and we've conquered communication, and we've conquered, watching movies and all sorts of multimedia. We've conquered business applications at a very high level. But now we're developing new technologies all at the same time that really promise to work together in a very particular way. And so, of course, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. We're talking about 5G. We're talking about VR and AR, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. AI, of course, is great for storing information and retrieving information, for looking at data and making sense of the data. 5G is great because it will allow all of this information gathering to actually take place at a reasonable speed. I think a lot of what AI can do would be lost in our current networks of, let's say, 4G, just because it's not fast enough. So a lot of that horsepower is missing. And then, VR and AR, which is the sort of user interface of all of this technology. They can all work together at the same time. AI, 5G, and VR can all work together at the same time. No doubt they will. No doubt they already are in many instances. And then there's a fourth piece, which is the sensor economy that is just about to emerge, which is we're about to put sensors on everything. Especially with 5G, with the ability to spread this information quickly and process the information quickly with 5G and AI. There's all sorts of applications for the world that having microsensors on everything could provide. Let's talk about the initial ones. First, we have VR training. So let's talk about VR first. Let's talk about how Walmart just bought 17,000 Oculus sets. And that's so that employees can tour vast real estate facilities faster and have an accurate understanding of how the factories work or the stores are laid out or where everything is located. And having these headsets and the ease of use involved with VR, and you can be sitting in the training room, but you're not in the training room anymore. It has improved the employee confidence at Walmart 10 to 15%. And that is confidence to do their job. That's confidence to come to work. Confidence in their ability to do a good job so that they feel job security, so that they feel like what they're doing matters. It's proven just to be a superior form of training. I mean, that's just the only way to say it. You train your people better, they're going to be happier employees. And so beyond, I would say, inventory management and beyond real estate delivery, VR is used in aviation, of course. Flight simulators were some of the earliest software on computers. Some of the earliest games you could play on computer were flight simulators. And they still are very, very popular. And they're evolving. They're becoming more and more like the actual practice of flying an airplane. But on the professional side, pilots use VR all the time. Astronauts too, to train themselves in all sorts of spacecraft or aircraft. And companies like Bell Helicopter have taken it to a whole new level. They market themselves as having extensive VR training for their helicopter pilots. Not only VR, but actual training too. The normal required actual hours, but extensive VR as well. So it's sort of a point of advertising for these high-end luxury transportation providers. Okay, so beyond inventory management with Walmart and aviation management and things like that, we have firefighters using VR to combat wildfires now, only virtually. So you can put a firefighter in some of the worst blazes in history and let them fight it out. And then they take off their Oculus headset and they're back to normal. We haven't lost any lives. We haven't wasted any equipment. We haven't even wasted any water. We haven't even burned anything down. Now, I know firefighters still do have facilities that they light on fire and then they have to go put it out. So, they're still doing the regular coursework. But VR just gives them another tool to sharpen their skills a little bit better. I mean, think about it. Maybe we can lose 10% less firefighters because they've been a little bit better trained. Over the course of a year, in a country like, let's say, Ukraine might lose, 10, 20 firefighters a year, let's say? Why not? No less? Okay, well, I got to believe it happens sometimes, and maybe virtual reality training would make it a little bit better. I know in the United States it happens sometimes. The wildfires in California killed a lot of firefighters. And I don't want to blame them. I mean, they're heroes. Everybody knows that what they did was selfless. They stayed up days on end to fight fires just to die in the same fire. But what if the team leaders had an opportunity to really train in virtual wildfires, made it like a video game so that, there is a way out of this, but you have to figure it out just like in real life. And I think it's a great way to prepare.
the same way that if you're a boxer, maybe playing a boxing video game can help you learn something, or if you're a professional American football player, playing Madden Live can help you learn something else about football, maybe help you learn about reads and coverages. It's the same thing. Playing the game makes you better at the game. And with firefighters, the consequences are serious, so we should be thankful to VR for what it's providing to us. And then, finally, surgeons can use VR to practice their craft. We're getting to a point, let's call it augmented reality now, where a surgeon can look into a screen and see what he's doing with his hands much better than he could ever do it with his eyes on his hands. He can see much closer, he can see with detail, he can see better angles. That alone is a sense of virtual reality already. And I think most hospitals have some version of this already. Hospitals can put a tube down your throat with a camera on the end of it. But as we get more precise, as we develop better products for, training of doctors, you're going to want it. Let's say we don't want to talk about this yet, but later on in this section, we're going to talk about contact lenses that provide augmented reality. Well, with doctors, with surgeons specifically, you put those contacts in, and before you know it, you're performing surgery at a much more precise level because you have all of this additional data. So, most important for us here at this program, Business Love with Ryan, and then our YouTube channel, which is Ryan's Business Class. And we're thinking about developing some sort of consulting branch of what we're doing on Fiverr or Upwork, just like we talked about last week. In terms of education, the education of students, the opportunity to use VR is very high, specifically with people who do very technical skills. They work on repairing boats, or they work on repairing airplanes or large trucks. But it's very expensive to have an airplane available sitting there in a hangar to work on for a bunch of young students to work on when, every day that this airplane is not flying is, $10,000 of depreciation? It's a very expensive proposition to train these guys. But now you put them in VR, they can work on the airplane until the cows come home. The sun never goes down in VR. You never lose light. You just put on that headset and you're with it. You can stay with it until you starve to death. So it's just the limits of the person learning now becomes the only limits. And it's true with, cruise ships. What are you going to do? Have cruise ships for students to learn on? Big, giant engines for them to be repairing? I'm sure it happens. Up until now, that's the way it's been. But I think there's a much more efficient way just around the corner, which is VR and VR applications. But for all of my viewers, and for the purpose of the podcast that we're doing here, they need content. And there's all different ways that somebody with no experience could create content. If it's a game, you could just write the story. Start off with writing the story of the game. Write down some features of the game that you want to have. If it's an experience, go to concerts with your own camera. And then, you would have to teach yourself, and I'm not somebody who knows about this necessarily, but I do know that if I wanted to get involved in the VR space, I would begin by educating myself, wouldn't I? I would begin by educating myself. And, I want to talk about this for business supermodels. So let's go on a little bit more into some of the other articles that I've been reading, and then we can come back to this. Finally, we want to get into the idea of a virtual workplace. Companies have really been burned by this coronavirus problem. And I think that if they switch to remote workforces, as I've said probably 100 times already on this show, they would be very well off. Well, certain companies are taking it to a whole new level already. The leader, or one of the most notable of which, is already a $1 billion valuation company. It's called EXP Realty. EXP Realty. EXP is sort of like experience points that you get from a video game, so it really does imply the VR world, the video world, a world where you interact artificially. However, it's realty. So what could that possibly mean? Well, last week I talked about being able to go into virtual reality and do work. Well, now imagine if there was let's say what EXP Realty is, which is a virtual campus. And there's all these different locations. And you can have your company headquarters there. You can have any sort of environment you want. You want to have business meetings on the beach with water? There it is. You want to have it around a swimming pool? There it is. You want to have it in a lavish marble conference room? There it is. You want to have it in the palace of the Caesar with the Romans walking all around? Why could not it also be there? It's just a real opportunity for anybody who has the imagination to see it, because it is coming, and it's going to need to be not only populated, but it's going to need to be contented. It's going to need to be, what's the word? Populated with content, I guess. Or it has to be, developed. That's the only way to say it. So, before we talk more about virtual reality, I want to talk about the sensor economy that's coming out. They call it the economy of a trillion sensors. And what that means is, well, there's an article that I read it from, and it's, we can't even comprehend the massive data haul we'll soon get from sensors. They're going to put sensors all over your body, if you want them, I guess, all over your house, all over your animal, all over vehicles, and any sort of performance-oriented devices. And you're going to have real-time data all the time that up until now has been very difficult to get. Imagine... Right now, we have more devices in the world connected to the internet than ever before, than people that live on the earth. So for every person on the earth, there's at least one device connected to the internet. But it's something probably more like 2, or maybe more. I know that I at least have 2. So there's a quote from Neil Gross, who is a sociologist, a noted sociologist, and he said, "In the next century, planet Earth will don an electric skin. It will use the internet as a scaffold to support and transmit its sensations." Well, I think that's already kind of true. I mean, we already have the World Wide Web. We already have the naturally occurring electromagnetic spectrum, which makes all of this possible. But I would say that it's, we're utilizing the electric skin that already exists on the surface of the Earth. We're now realizing ways that we can tap into it. First, it was radio waves. Radio waves already exist. We just figured out how to transmit content on them. Microwaves exist around us always. We just found a way to harness them and to channel them. And now we're going to be using 5G. And it's difficult to... 5G is sort of a delicate network. It doesn't work over as well as we would like it to yet. Obviously, we're not very far away, but we still need to develop. So by 2030, it's estimated that there will be 500 billion connected devices, and it will be an economy of about $14 trillion a year. That's bigger than China currently is. You know how many billionaires are going to come out of this reality? The simplest version of a sensor device that is out right now is this idea of the Oura Ring. The Oura Ring goes around one of your fingers, and it measures your sleep. It measures your blood flow, for most notably. And up until now, they've had sleep devices on your wrist, but the blood is too deep inside your wrist to get a very deep reading. Maybe you get 1 piece of information per second, or 12 pieces of information per second. But this device can turn out like 250 pieces of information a second, because in your finger the blood is very close, so you're more intimately connected to that data flow. So doctors will no longer need to rely on annual checkups. They'll be able to look at you at any time, look at your data at any time on the interface that your body's sensors are plugged into. And this is desirable for most people. I suppose some people will have a privacy problem, but I think most people will recognize that this is a very good way to keep themselves alive and to team up with their doctor much more closely. Now, if you want a business idea out of all of this interface that doctors use to dialogue and connect with these sensors is going to need to be developed. So how's it going to look? How's it going to feel? This is a business that can be started and will almost certainly, garner some interest. Farmers will get to know exactly how much moisture content is in both the soil and the sky, allowing them to optimize their practices to get healthier crops, bigger yields, and use less water. Within a decade, we will live in a world where just about anything that can be measured will be measured. And now that we have AI at the same time to help us make sense of all that data and to categorize it and to process it, we're on the cusp of a brand new reality. If you know what it is, you can plan your business ideas accordingly. It's a hyper-conscious planet. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about, at least for Tech Tuesday and these articles that I wanted to focus on, was this article by Jason Dorier, which talks about Mojo Vision's augmented reality contact lenses kick off a race to AR on your eye. In other words, they want you to be able to put contacts in your eye that have an augmented reality screen projected from them. Amazing technology. Right now, we're still in the prototype phase, but they've been able to show journalists enough to garner a lot of excitement. They've had to invent everything fresh. All the components that they use, the platform of the surface of the lens, the disinfectant bath that also serves as a charger, and the resolution is unbelievable. That they're using is 14K resolution, whereas your iPhone is probably 4K resolution. So it's 3.5 times better resolution on the surface of your eye that you'll be able to see as though it's a regular display than any devices that we have right now currently. So obviously it's still a prototype. And they had told the world at the beginning that they were going to create an AR platform. But what I surmise happened is that they thought it through. They said, okay, so we make the platform, and then what? Well, we need applications for the platform. Okay, and then what? Well, we got to market the platform. Okay, and then what? Well, then we have version 2.0. Well, what would that be? Well, version 2.0 will probably be contact lenses. Oh, so that's where we're going. Let's go there now. Let's just go there. So in a way, it's risky because they're hedging their bets that they're going to be able to make certain leaps in technology. But at the same time, they've already received over $100 million in funding. So this project did gain the interest that they were hoping. And one really useful application that may be for augmented reality contact lenses is this like a teleprompter, that if you have a public speech to make, you can just read off a teleprompter that's on the contact lens. Nobody knows that you're even reading from the teleprompter. They just sound like you're reading something from your imagination. But I think, it's just an example of how useful this could really be. And, they don't want to overhype it, but they've already been designated as an FDA breakthrough device. So the FDA is very actively looking at this product and fast-tracking its development. Beyond that, they want to focus it on visually impaired people in the beginning, probably because they think it's the most good, and there's probably a lucrative financial market for helping repair lost vision. So it's an exciting time. Augmented reality contact lenses would be good for doctors, and it's a really far cry from just 2012 when Palmer Luckey sold Oculus to Facebook for $2 billion. We've come a long way in less than 10 years. It's a very exciting time, and I'm glad to be commenting on it. A business supermodel from all of this discussion on virtual reality and what it can mean for young people or young professionals or ambitious adults who wish to participate in this industry. It's strange to know that an industry is coming and that it'll make a lot of money and identify it and feel like you're ahead of the curve, but not actually understand how to participate in any sort of meaningful way. Virtual reality is tough because there's a lot of really advanced technology involved. I would say that if a normal person, an outsider, somebody who's not in the technical loop, Silicon Valley loop, wants to participate, probably the way to get started would be to create the content or to plan the content that's going to be used on virtual reality, because the guys who know how to code it are not necessarily the most terribly literary or creative community. They might be. I mean, I'm sure there's VR technicians or coders who are also great storytellers, but it's not something you would traditionally associate with one another. So you could be the one to prepare that. You know, it starts with, you know, game concepts or application concepts or concepts for training courses or experiential programs that then must be coded, of course, into the hardware in some way, but that could be done as a team effort. The way to get started is to start creating the content. You want to outline it. You want to write down what it will be, what are the features, how does it work, how do you want it to process, you know, what do you want the experience to be of the user? And those are just technical things. You know, what problem does it solve? You know, I want to learn how to fix a truck. Does this help me learn how to fix a truck? Does this help me meet girls in bars? Does this help me have experiences like jumping out of airplanes when I would never do that in real life? How does it help me? What does it do for me? What problem does it solve? Is it just a very fun game that the VR experience makes that much better? So let's say you wish to be a virtual reality content creator, and where would you get started? Well, the first step, of course, would be that you want to educate yourself about the medium. You know, what is already taking place? What are other people already doing? What kind of VR applications are already being written and produced and that are available to the public? Oculus is out there. So how are companies using Oculus with their content? I know video games have features specifically for Oculus. So there's some video games which you very much can choose to be more VR oriented. I don't know how good they are. I mean, they're sort of stiff, but they're coming along. You know, movies could not be just movies anymore. You could be inside of them. You could have choices to make. You could have challenges within the movie, and it's still a movie. There was a movie that came out recently called Player One Go. Fantastic movie. I highly recommend it. It's about people live in virtual reality all the time. They're racing, they're fighting, there's all sorts of games they can play, and they build up their character in virtual reality world, and, you know, they have their life there. And the real world is just people stacked on top of each other in a junkyard, more or less, but they don't really care because most of their time is in these virtual paradises where they're doing all these missions and experiencing all these different sensations. And it seems like a shadow of the future that's coming. It seems like not very long from now, this will be the way things are, especially with this coronavirus. I mean, we need virtual reality now. It would be so interesting, so fascinating. Our social lives could continue in a way that is just not possible right now, even here in 2020. Fortunately, we have social media, at least. I can only imagine what it was like in 1918 when they had no anything and they're quarantined in a room with their books, I suppose. Not a very good time. Life was a lot slower back then. So the first thing you want to do is educate yourself. What do the customers want? What do they expect? What's already being done? What is the nature of the platform? What are the companies that are participating in creating the content? Because you're going to want them to more or less sign you, the way a rock star gets signed by a record label. They want your content. Maybe they buy it like a script. I think that the actual best way has yet to be determined. So it's like, you know, go blaze your own trail. But, you know, it starts off with understanding the industry and the competition and the customer. So beyond that, you want to establish yourself. So you still want your website and your social media. You want to brand yourself as sort of a VR content development company. And even though you don't have any content yet, even though the extent of your content is notes you've made in a spiral notebook, it's still enough to move forward. You're establishing. You don't need anybody's permission. So you establish yourself, and maybe you start trying to network a little bit. You start going to tech crunches. You start going to conferences. You start trying to meet people, and when you meet them, you tell them, I'm I'm interested in creating content for virtual reality. I've already done a lot of work on this, and I think I have some very interesting ideas that I would like to share with whoever will listen. I think some people will listen to you, especially if you seem like an interesting person. So then beyond that, you want to develop your content. So this will be the most expensive part. You'll probably need funders for it, I imagine. But what you can do before you even have funding, because at this show, we want to talk about how to make your business with no money. I think with the resources in the modern world, it's more often than not, you can get it off the ground without spending any money. So let's say that in terms of your product development, it's really the outline, it's really the prototype, it's the storyboard, the script that you write, the list of features and how you want them to work and how you want them to interact with each other and how players interact with the game and, you know, all of these issues. How does the game notify you? What is multiplayer like? What are the rules? And I don't want to harp just on games because there's also, you know, training programs that are just as relevant. Maybe you could teach something by having excellent cameras all around. You know, 3D camera work, you might have to rent it for a couple of days. You could, for instance, you wanted to teach people how to fix a certain type of car that you have. You're a mechanic, you want to teach it. So you would get the proper camera equipment. You'd probably have to rent it, so that would cost some money as well. But if you started with your script and you approach the correct kind of company, they might fund the production and they would already have the cameras that you need and everything. So it's all about creating your concept. It's like this with any business. Create your concept, document it on paper, and sort of make a game plan about how you're going to approach the industry with your documentation that you just made. And that'll go a long way towards getting your idea created. It's not a wise idea just to think, how can I spend money to make this happen? You know, go out and look for friends. It's scary to look for friends. It's easier to throw money at a problem, but with an industry like this, you don't stand a chance. You don't stand a chance to buy the millions of dollars of equipment that's necessary to create a real, you know, virtual reality environment, but it doesn't mean you can't get started participating. It comes down to concepts. Concepts have tremendous value in the business world, especially if they're well documented. So beyond that, then you want to start to market your product. Let's say that you found, you had your content, and you've developed your concept, let's call it a concept document. You've created your concept document, which is more or less a business plan. You've storyboarded it, so you have some artwork associated with it. And now you can start to, and you've documented that it's yours with time-stamped information so that you have some copyright backing. You know, you email your files to yourself, at least. So you've established yourself, you've developed your product in terms of the plan that you've written out, and now you need to market your product. So really what you're doing is now you're starting to approach the production companies that are most interested in what you're trying to do. Maybe the big ones will like what they hear. Maybe the smaller ones are better because they're easier to approach. You know, and one tip I would include is if you're going to approach a big company, try to find people in the company already and try to make friends with low level who can introduce you to mid level who can introduce you to higher level, and then higher level who can introduce you to the top. Don't just run in, show what you got, nobody pays attention, you get discouraged and go home. Or don't just run in and blow up the CEO's LinkedIn every chance you get, or, you know, send him 1,000 emails like he's the only one to talk to. Because what I've learned, especially, you know, you're always learning in this world, but even recently I've learned that if you approach people through another person who's trusted, you're going to get much further. But I don't want to get distracted with that. We're just talking about basic practices for virtual reality business now. We'll talk about, you know, advanced networking at another time. So you're marketing your project, and your target customer is the companies who can make it into a bigger project. So beyond that, it's time to deliver your product. So let's say that you have somebody who wants to sign you. You need to show up, and you need to coordinate. and you need to be actively invested in the process of developing this product. So you don't just hand it off and go, sleep by the bar. You get your hands dirty. You roll up your sleeves, even though you're dealing with a highly competent team now. And maybe because you're dealing with a highly competent team, it's all the reason to start articulating what your vision is even more. So, you're delivering your product, and that is passing the knowledge and the concept to the team. But you're much better off if you stay part of it. It secures your equity in terms of in the case of a court battle as well. Let's suppose that you only had a couple hours of FaceTime with this company altogether, and later on they decide to try to cut you out of the process. Well, you only spent 90 minutes in the headquarters total, so how could you really prove that which you need to prove? They can prove that they picked up the ball and they ran with it 95 yards. Can you prove that you got those first 5 yards that are critical? I'm not sure. But if you have spent 10, 20, 30 hours, and in the negotiation process, you want to definitely say, I want to be part of this development. Maybe you don't want to be part of it, but what you really don't want is to lose out on your stake. So, showing up is a big piece of having it. So, and then beyond that is customer service. And what does customer service look like when you've sold your project concept to a larger company? Well, I would say that it includes staying on good terms with the executives at that company. Now that you've opened the door and they know who you are, there's no reason why you can't send them birthday cards. In fact, that's good. That's networking 202, isn't it? You know their name when you see them. Hi, Mr. Thomas. Hello, Mrs. Gray. Hello, Dave. Hello, Donna. Nice to see you. Let's keep working, being positive, can-do attitude. And those cover your 6 steps. That's your general business setup. But I think the key of it all is use your imagination. Think about what would be cool in a virtual reality environment and write it down. Write it down in a way that is usable by other people, so you want to, format it in a way that is functional. And you'll be well on your way to having a company because you've developed intellectual property. So I think it costs nothing to get started. Just notepad, a paper, and a pen. And outlining your project is the most important step, hands down, far and away. And because it's the point when you go from having an idea in your head to having a document with your idea spelled out in the physical world. It is going from nothing to something. It is where the rubber, you would say where the rubber meets the road, but it's more like when the airplane is taking off and the rubber leaves the road. That's sort of that moment when, you take flight. So that is our business supermodels section for this this week. And, just going over it again, you have infinite potential to create any idea. All you have to do is properly document the idea. And the world is waiting to receive it if you ask them properly. Good luck. Here we are again at another Strategy Now session. We're hoping to bring you good strategies for whatever you're trying to do, how to build a better company, I suppose how to live a better life. And I haven't really talked about helping other people live better lives or be better people. Because for one, it's like, who am I to tell anybody how to live? But also, it's insulting. I feel like I'll alienate certain people if I say do this or you should be this or be like me. I don't see it that way. I'm a student, you're a student, we're learning together. That's how I look at it. However, I have been very interested in the field of mentoring. I suppose on some level that's what this podcast and Ryan's business class and the goal of my career is to sort of be a mentor. And the reason is because I feel like the greatest way to create value in the world is to develop somebody into a business starter, especially if they can be successful, especially if they're willing to fight until success comes. You've taken somebody who otherwise would have been a low-value person and turned him into a high-value person. They're so happy for it because this is the only life that they're going to get. But society in general is so happy for it too, because if you create a business, that's putting food on the plates of numerous employees and bringing more business to suppliers. All those business-to-business transactions that make your business actually function are making a lot of other businesses function too. Imagine if we could start 100 businesses. Imagine how many suppliers and employees and families would now have a little bit more food or a little bit more clothes or, better opportunities for vacation or electronic devices because we've determined to make our own dreams happen. It's like by serving ourselves, other people get served as well. Never buy into this attitude that somehow business is predatory. And next time somebody says predatory capitalism to you, you should do violence to them. Because what they're actually saying to you is, I don't like the way life is. Because there is no capitalism versus some other system. There is no other system. There is no other system that works. When somebody says to you, communism or fascism or, monarchy or whatever, what they're really saying to you is somebody else is the boss of you. You are not free. You do what they tell you to do. They give you the rights that you have in your life. And you better hope that they're right. And actually, probably they're not. Because governments don't do anything really excellent. But we do know that capitalism brings out the best in our business. Businesses know how to run themselves than governments know how to run businesses. And so that is the most valuable thing that can be, is an independent person who is free to make their dreams happen because they have the knowledge and they've been gifted the motivation to do it. And an understanding of the reality of how much struggle it's going to be. If you know you're going to receive 200 no's before you hear a yes, you know it, then you just plow through it. No. Okay, I got it. That was 200. Yes, there it is. But you don't know that. You just know that maybe it'll come someday. It's a lot harder. That is why I think the mentoring process is so valuable, because it's somebody else who can say, I've been there, I know what it takes, I know what the probabilities are, I know how it feels to be in the worst sections, I know how it feels to be in the best sections, the best of times, I know how to handle the ups and downs of this industry. And, they're also going to have knowledges of other people in the industry so they can help you network, they can help you get into better positions, they can surround you with advice and assistance. So I've been, studying on it, and like I said, I want to be a mentor, I guess. I don't feel worthy to be a mentor, really. I guess in a way nobody is, because this is, everybody's life is just infinitely valuable universe. But, I can be somebody who documents a niche of truth, a niche of understanding that people generally are searching for, and I can share it, and that can be my value proposition, and I can say to a certain extent, and to an increasing extent, that I'm an expert in the beginning of this process. The fundamental founding stages of conceiving and configuring your goal. Because that's where the success and the failure ultimately happens. Right? Every day I see businesses that start up and they don't market process properly, so they close. They didn't see the need to make friends, or they didn't understand the proper order of what they were doing. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I don't exactly feel like I'm showing other people how to be. I'm just trying to create the most valuable thing that there is. It's almost non-personal, at least in the beginning of it. When you're actually doing it, it becomes very emotional, very personal. There's friendships, there's relationships that have been developed. But at this point, it's not really about any of that. It's just about creating value. And that value resonates through society at multiple points. And so we are educators, but we're also mentors. And one thing that I've read numerous articles about mentoring these last few days as well. I really wanted to have a better preparation for this program. And we're still developing a system of hashing out the information and determining what we want to put in and this sort of thing. But we've been reading articles on mentoring. And before I get started on each individual one, I want to say that the theme that was most touching about all of it is that you don't just focus on people's career, why they're being mentored. I'm a tech executive and I'm being mentored by another tech executive. And when we meet, he wants to talk to me about my personal life. Why? He wants to talk to me about how my relationships are going with other people. Why? How much I'm enjoying my job or my education or my personal life, or am I, why is he asking me about my spiritual history or my goals for the future outside of work? But it's because the concept is that if you want to be a good mentor, you have to mentor the whole person. I'm conflicted about this because I'm somebody who wants to sit down with even the people I'm most interested in and just immediately begin talking about business ideas. I just want to jump right into it. It's the only thing I care about talking about it. Hi, how are you? Great. Oh, that's great. Let's sit down and talk. Cool. Anything new? Well, I'm just curious what your ambitions are. Where are we going with this? This is what I want to know. Let's do it. Let's do it faster. Let's make it happen together. And perhaps that's ambition. Perhaps it's a social mechanism. You cut right to the meat. That way, that at least you're being high value in a certain way. Whether you're socially smooth or pleasant is another story. But turns out that it, just like within normal life, even within the mentoring relationship that is determined, that is designed, that is agreed upon because of perhaps a career goal, taking a personal stock in the individual is what really separates good mentors from great mentors. And so some qualities of a good mentor is a desire to help others, commit real time, deep knowledge, honesty about the highs and the lows, and then a skill in developing others. And that skill in developing others is where that personal relationship comes in, because part of developing another person is having them trust you. So when they see or when they feel that you care about them personally, they're much more likely to listen to your professional advice. Now, if you, on the other side of this, a mentee, and I hate this word, mentee is a stupid word, mentor was in the book of the Odyssey, mentor was the teacher, the older teacher of Odysseus' son, was mentor, an old man of great wisdom, and he was a guidance counselor for this younger boy. And you would call him a mentee. Mentor is a great word if you think that it came from a name of a mythological Greek character, but a mentee doesn't appeal to me. Anyways, enough of that. A good mentee, though, is committed, goal-oriented, willing to ask for help, accept feedback, responsible and accountable, and above all, they are available. I said it in our educational course that's also in our video section that, being on time is 90% of success. 90% of the success you can hope to achieve in the world is just showing up and doing it. Look at this podcast, for instance. I wouldn't say we're successful yet, but I'm definitely pleased with the direction that we're going. And, every segment we do, I can look back on it and say, well, let's do this better next time. Maybe this one will be better. Maybe we should raise our voice or change our microphone settings or change the way I sit or change the way I prepare my content. But the point is, above all, we are showing up. We are on a schedule, good or bad, success or failure. We are going to be recording this on Sunday afternoon. It's going to happen. We are showing up on time, and that is the number one reason, even more than the quality of what we're doing or the greatness of my mind. Even more than that, it's the fact that I'm here and I'm doing it, and I'm agreeable with my teammates. So that's what being a good mentor is. And if you have teammates, by the way, you're always in a good position to think of them as your boss and you as serving them. And hopefully they look at you the same way. So when you first get a good mentor, the first thing you really want to do is discuss the structure of the relationship. You know this person is going to be a mentor. You know you're going to be a mentee. There's a professional environment already established and a professional career agenda already established. So you can openly discuss it. You want to get to know each other in a personal way, and you want to set the agenda for the relationship. What is our goal here? Oh, well, I would like to get a promotion. All right, we're going to focus on that. And then, after some time, you want to reflect and evaluate. Maybe when you meet with your mentor or you meet with your mentee, you want to talk about how the previous week went. You don't just want to jump into problems from the future or, making plans. You want to evaluate the steps you've already taken and then make new plans for the next week. And then, you want, when you close out the relationship, maybe a semester is finished or a fiscal year is finished. And so the planned period of time for this mentoring to take place has concluded. And then, so beyond that, if you're a mentor, you want to make sure your mentee was satisfied with their experience. If you're a mentee, you want to know that your mentor approves of your development. So it's important to get that customer feedback. On both sides of it, the other person is sort of a customer of a type of service like your mentor is a customer for your development in a way, and your mentee is a customer for their development in a way. So everything really becomes about them. How well did I do in helping you get to your goals? How well did I do in taking your advice? These are the two sides of the equation. Okay, so, and anyways, I think generally having a mentor at some point is really essential to your career's growth and development if you really want to put it on the fast track. I would say almost the number one thing you hope for is that they introduce you to the right people, but just saving you from making years-long mistakes is a big deal. So I was reading an article from Entrepreneur Magazine by Shakun Patel. He's a VIP contributor. And he was also talking about what makes a mentor is good. They actively advocate for you. And, that means purposely introducing you to other people in the company, introduce you around the country club, this sort of thing. And they keep the pressure up. They're never happy with your substandard performance. They know what you can do. They've seen it. If your next week is less than, you need them to tell you this. Keep trying. You need to be better. It's not enough just to be okay. Keep it real. Be honest about what your recent performance was. It was pretty good. No, it was not so good. You really need to improve it. What are we doing here? Be honest. And you want them to actively pass on their experience. This is probably what most people expect from mentors. But then you also want them to have empathy for you. So, they need to understand that they were in your position once too, and you're not going to know everything. And, some people get angry when people make mistakes. That's not good for a mentor relationship. And beyond that, keep the relationship under control. Don't be too personal. If you're dealing with intergender relationships, you might want to think twice before you make it too personal, for instance. Because you still got to work with these people. You're still responsible for this young man or woman's development. So maybe, for instance, jumping into a personal relationship or let's say a competitive relationship where you somehow have a competitive feeling towards this person who you're supposed to be guiding through their development, this is also a bad thing. You want to put the relationship before the mentorship. That is a point that I found to be very interesting. It's, this is where we start to talk about you as a person, getting to know you as a person, caring about what you're going through, your home life, your personal growth. Be an actual friend to this person, and then a mentor. But the reason you put your relationship first is because trust is a very critical element in actually developing this young individual. You want to focus on character rather than competency. You want to do a good job when you do your tasks, but what's much more important is that you can pick yourself up when you fail. So it's like, well, this attempt wasn't so great. There you are. You failed, you're in the dirt. Can you pick yourself up? Can you clean yourself up again? Character, values, self-awareness, empathy, and capacity for respect. These are very important. You want to shout loudly with your optimism and keep quiet with your cynicism. Consider why an idea might work before you consider why it might not. This young person is going to come to you with all sorts of ideas, and you want to make sure you understand what they're saying before you give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And if it is going to be a thumbs down, really think twice about how you're going to deliver that information, because it could be painful, because they're excited about their development, and all of a sudden it wasn't going as well as they thought. There's a 24/3 rule of optimism when you're determining if an idea is good. I'm not sure if I have ever heard of this before, and it's 24 seconds, 24 minutes, 24 hours. Now, can you have an idea and think about it for 24 seconds positively? Can you have an idea and think about it for 24 minutes positively? And then you review the same idea for 24 hours, and does it stay positive? I don't exactly agree with the rule that you should try to approach any idea without criticism, because I think being critical is actually a high strength. There's a difference between being critical about an idea and being pessimistic about the idea. So you want to, be an optimist. If things can work, they might work. Let's be honest. But at the same time, there's some real problems with this idea that we need to hash out. And even optimal luck and fantastic circumstances aren't going to help if the structure isn't proper. So you think about the idea, and I don't know, trying to put on rose glasses for 24 hours before you decide to get critical, it's up to you. But anyways, it's sort of a popular rule that's floating around office memos lately. All right, and then be loyal with your mentee more than you're loyal to the company for which you both work. The closest personal thing I could think of to this example is when I was a waiter in a restaurant and somebody had a problem with their food, I took that food back into the kitchen and I represented the customer to the kitchen. I never went back into and I never argued with the customer on behalf of the kitchen. When the customer has a problem, let me get that. Those guys back there really screwed it up. Now, maybe I go back into the kitchen and I say, I got these customers out here that don't understand, but I'm still going to put my foot down that we're going to solve this. I want that tip. I want, I need that good experience. So you want to be more loyal to your mentee than to your company. And it's the same idea as, like I just said, you want to be more loyal to your customer than to the company that you work. Yes, that's right. Committed to the best interest of colleagues and employees. Now, this is the best article I found. So, let's take a moment. The best article I found about mentoring that really moved me the most was, it was written by Rick Woolworth, and he started a group called, let me find the name of it. I lost it on my page. Right. Telemachus. Telemachus was the name of Odysseus' son, to whom Mentor was the first mentor. And he started an organization called Telemachus, which is what appears to be a very high-end mentoring society. So he's the founder of this, so he spends all of his time thinking about mentoring young people into professionalism. I mean, think of this as like country club level mentoring, country club level networking. I highly recommend you go to their website. It's very interesting. But he talks about how, he titles the article, Great Mentors Focus on the Whole Person, Not Just Their Career. And he talks about how 75% of professional men and women wish they had a mentor, but only about 37% actually have one. And what that means is about half the people who wish they had a mentor don't have one. Vast majority focus on how it is practiced in the workplace and how organizations-wide programs are administered. They don't focus on mentoring the whole person, extending beyond the career to include discussions about behavior, values, relationships, parenting, finances, and even spiritual life. But if you really want to develop that trust that goes into really touching a person and moving them and developing them profoundly, you need to touch into their personal life too. It's just another way for them to accept you into their life. I wanted to talk about it because it leads into our profiles and success. I was looking at an article and I realized that a lot of very famous people have been mentored by other very famous people. Probably the most interesting for this community that I'm talking to was Mark Zuckerberg was mentored by Steve Jobs. Mark Zuckerberg started coming up in 2008. Steve Jobs only had a couple years to live at this point. He might have known it, he might not have, but he took Mark Zuckerberg under his wing and really taught him a lot of things about what it means to be an executive at the level that both of them sort of found themselves to be. You know, in their world, you have very few people who are at the same pinnacle as you are. And I imagine Steve Jobs saw Mark Zuckerberg and said, this kid could benefit from the information that I have. And he probably also saw that this was one of the few truly apt pupils that he could ever have, because there's going to be very few people in Mark Zuckerberg's position ever. There was other notable relationships, though. The most interesting one was probably Aristotle was the mentor to Alexander the Great. We can only guess what directions that mentoring would have taken. You know, how instrumental was Aristotle in Alexander the Great's desire for conquest and his thirst for power and his just insatiable lust for life. Maybe a lot, maybe a little. Maybe he had more to do with, helping Alexander sort of tamp down some of his more robust emotions so that he could be more functional. It could have gone both ways. Maya Angelou mentored Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey is such a giant, and Maya Angelou is a great poet. It's sort of like, I imagine Oprah Winfrey could mentor almost any young person in her same position at this point, and she probably does. Mother Teresa had a mentor in Michael Vanderpeet. Christian Dior mentored Yves Saint Laurent. Warren Buffett mentored Bill Gates. I'd never heard of it called that until I read this article. I had heard that Warren Buffett and Bill Gates had sort of formed a charity together, but I had never thought of Warren Buffett as sort of Bill Gates' superior. I've never heard that before. It says, two of the world's most successful businessmen. Gates admits that over the years he has turned to Buffett for advice on various subjects and has referred to Buffett as one of a kind. So I guess there is some acknowledgement of this sort of elder and pupil sort of dynamic. Robert De Niro and Marlon Brando were both trained by Stella Adler, who had her own school, really taught them to be who they are as actors, the Stanislavski method of acting. Steven Spielberg is mentoring J.J. Abrams. How successfully is up for debate. Socrates mentoring Plato, Plato mentoring Aristotle, Aristotle mentoring Alexander the Great, so to speak. Gopal Krishna Gokal mentoring Mahatma Gandhi. That's interesting. And Mahatma Gandhi mentoring Nelson Mandela. Michelle Robinson, who later married Barack Obama, mentored him in the university, which is actually how they met. Audrey Hepburn mentoring Elizabeth Taylor. Fascinating on that one. Professor Dumbledore mentoring Harry Potter. That's sort of a stretch. And then Sir Freddie Laker mentoring Richard Branson. So, a lot of these guys who are really touching the sky and reaching the pinnacle of society, at some point along the way, we're assisted by other people who have already been up there, who have already been on the national stage, who have already been globally successful in different ways. Not just money. Money is not everything. But it goes to show you that even people who we truly consider great, like Oprah Winfrey, like Barack Obama, I guess, like Aristotle, they had mentors too. And who knows how well they would have done without it. Especially with Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, that relationship it's difficult to know where Socrates ends and Plato begins. Partially because we don't have what Socrates said, but maybe because Plato was such a fine copy. And so for our profiles in success, we just really want to talk about how these are very successful people, great people. Some would say maybe some of the best ever, and still they look to somebody else. So if you really want to be the best that you can be, first determine who you want to be, and then go find somebody else who's already done it, who's done something like it. And they will be able to save you years of mistakes. That is almost certain and without question. And we are hoping to help you do the same if we can. I would like to avoid my own mistakes, so maybe I should find a mentor in this industry. But I just want to focus on the mentoring relationship, and if you don't have one, get one. It'll serve you time and time again. Thanks.